Hello, good morning from Tucson, Arizona. It's afternoon for some of you. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Pilar Thomas. I'm a partner in the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Practice Group here at Quarles and Brady. I also am in the Indian Law Practice Group. My focus is primarily on tribal renewable energy development and finance, economic development, federal Indian law, and natural resources development. Our discussion today is focused on the American Rescue Plan Act and its amendments to the Small Business Credit Initiative, which now provide opportunities for tribes to invest directly, either through credit support programs or equity investment programs in small businesses, including tribal businesses. We will address a variety of important topics this morning, including the upcoming deadline of April 10th for tribes to file a notice of intent to apply for funds under this initiative. Before we begin the presentation, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. First, a copy of today's presentation is located in the materials found in the handouts panel in your dashboard. Second, we've muted all phone lines for those dialing in and for participants listening to audio via computer, so you won't be able to speak. So we're in listen-only mode. Third, if you'd like to, we'd ask you to be aware that the presentation is being recorded, and the recording will be linked on the Quarles and Brady website. And finally, if you have a question, please type your question in the question box that's located in the upper right-hand corner of the dashboard and submit it. Our efforts will be made to answer questions as we go along, and certainly near the end of our time together today. So let's get started. The American Rescue Plan Small Business Credit Initiative, an opportunity for tribes to invest in small businesses. A little bit about myself, as I just introduced myself. So today we're going to go over a handful of things in the presentation, an overview of the state Small Business Credit Initiative that was originally enacted in 2010, what the American Rescue Plan amendments cover and how it includes tribes now in the state Small Business Credit Initiative, some key program opportunities for tribes to consider as they're trying to determine whether to participate in this program, program administration, other tribal enterprise opportunities, a few key questions to ask for Treasury if Treasury conducts consultation on this, and then finally a view of what this notice of intent to apply will look like, or what we think it will look like. So an overview of the Small Business Credit Initiative. The SBACI was originally enacted in 2010 to, quote, strengthen state programs that support small businesses. And it provides federal funding directly to states for credit support or venture capital investment programs. The SBACI can be found at 12 USC section 5701. The SBACI establishes two types of credit programs, a capital access program and then other credit support programs. Each of them have slightly different requirements with respect to how much funds can be invested per small business and what the definition of small business is. So for example, under the capital access program, there's a limitation on businesses that are 500 employees or less, and for the loans that are supported through that program, a $5 million loan cap. For the other credit support programs, the target is 500 employees, but it can't be any more than 750 employees. There's an average $5 million loan size, but no more than $20 million. And then finally, with respect to the I'm sorry, so with the other credit support programs, that includes both credit support, so loan programs, as well as investment support. Under the rules, and these are maintained in the current amendments, states are supposed to apply to Treasury to administer programs, and they have to comply with each program's statutory requirements. States get their funds in 3 tranches, and they're able to use a portion of those funds for administration. The first tranche is 5% of the funds can be used for administration, and the second tranche is that 3% of the funds can be used for administration. So the ARP has amended the SBACI in several critical ways. All right, let me see if I can get this moved. Sorry about that. So the first critical way, I'm sorry, before we get the amendments, I apologize. I'm having a little trouble with my technology here. So a quick summary of the programs that the states have implemented under the SSBI. So as I said earlier, the statute creates a capital access program. This is a program that's basically a loan insurance program. So you provide a portfolio loan loss reserve. The lender and the borrower contribute a premium payment, like an insurance premium payment, for a share of the loan value. And then the state, and in this case, possibly the tribe, would match those funds, and the federal funds could then also be matched. States also have established loan guarantee programs, which many tribes are familiar with, similar to the BIA loan guarantee program, for example, but built around state requirements. Collateral support programs are ways for states to provide cash collateral to lenders that would help boost the value of available collateral that a small business might have. And so the funds can be used as a cash collateral payment. Loan participation programs include either participating as a portion of a loan or providing a second loan in conjunction with whatever private loans might be made. So what's called a companion loan here. And then the last type of credit support program is a venture capital program that provides financing by purchasing an ownership interest. So it's basically an equity ownership investment or an equity-like loan to enterprises. And we'll get a little bit more detail about the stage of enterprise development that states have invested in. But the 4 basic types of groups that states have created for venture capital include kind of a fund of funds approach, state-supported entities, which might be a nonprofit or a separate state economic development authority, the state agencies themselves, such as a state treasury department, and then co-investment models where states will invest with a private entity in a separate fund, and then the private entity actually runs the fund. With respect to some more of the popular programs that states have developed, the loan participation and relending program, which allows, again, for a direct loan to a small business, either in participation with another lender, and in some states, they have actually co-funded loans and partnerships with CDFIs. So California, for example, has put a good chunk of its money into its CDFIs. And so for native CDFIs and tribes that have native CDFIs, this might be an opportunity to use the federal funding to, in joint collaboration with the CDFI, provide business loans to tribal members and tribal member-owned businesses. On the venture capital, on the loan guarantee side, again, it's pretty standard. You provide an assurance to the lender that you will repay the loan in part. There is no requirement under the SSBCI of whether that's 50%, 80%, 90%, but it works, again, the same basic way. If you have a small business that unfortunately defaults on its loan, then the loan guarantee program steps in. So these funds would be used as that guarantee. And so you would reserve a portion of the amount guaranteed, and a segregated cash account might be controlled by the tribe, and you're only guaranteeing a portion of that. Of course, you'd have to identify all your other requirements. On the equity investment program side that states have done, this is a model of how they have typically set it up by category, who manages the investment of the venture capital fund, what the terms might be, the typical terms, and then how they measure, their return on investment. So these are 4 models, again, that the states have developed and that tribes could look to for how to set up venture capital funds if they make a determination that they want to use the federal money for equity investment. So with respect to equity investment stages, the states have invested in every stage of a company, pre-seed or proof of concept. So the very beginning, where you might typically see a lot of grants, incubators, you might typically see angel investors at this point. So I don't really have a product yet. It's just something I'm thinking about. The seed capital and early stage funds. This is typically where tribes, of course, invest in their own tribal businesses. They will provide seed capital to start the Section 17 or to provide funds for a subsidiary to the Section 17 or other economic development corporations that a tribe might have. So most tribes are very familiar with the seed capital early stage funding where we start the business and we start to launch the business. And so these federal funds can be used for that stage of funding as well. In addition, you can use it for later stages. So maybe your corporation has demonstrated that there is established demand for their products or services. They're starting to build the business. Earnings are starting to increase. And now maybe they need capital to scale up or expand the business. And so for a lot of tribes, for example, they might be looking at acquiring new businesses and they need capital to do that, or expanding existing businesses and you need capital to do that. And so the states have in fact invested in all these stages of funding. And so this is an opportunity as well for tribes. Additional program requirements, the states have to demonstrate that they have the lawful authority to operate these businesses or these funds, that they have the capacity, and that there's financial stability in the effort. There's also Treasury guidance, policy guidance. They've developed national standards around compliance and oversight. And there's a requirement in the statute that the states, and this would likely include tribes now, have to sign an allocation agreement, which is an agreement between the state and Treasury for the money that they get, the allocation that they get, and how they will use those funds. There are statutory leverage ratios. So 10-to-1 for all programs. So for every $1 federal dollar that a tribe invests or a state invests, you have to attract $10 in private capital or state capital. But the minimum for the other credit support programs is a 1-to-1. So for every $1 that the feds put in, the state or tribe have to come up with another dollar. And then lastly, there are some lender and borrower certifications related to the use of funds. You can't use it for certain types of businesses. The businesses can't use it for certain types of purposes. There are some financial stability requirements, and there is a prohibition against certain folks who have been convicted of sexual predator or other sexual assault type of crimes are prohibited from receiving the funds. So the ARP has amended the SSBCI. This can be found in Title 3, Section 3301, to first and foremost, for our purposes, include tribes. So they've expanded the definition of state and they've included tribes, and that's federally recognized tribes. So the definition of tribe is a federally recognized tribe, and it has created a $500 million set aside for tribal funding. There's additional set-asides and incentive programs that have been developed. Unclear whether tribes can take advantage of these incentive programs. And as you'll see later, this is maybe a question for Treasury, but there is a set-aside for the states for $1.5 billion. The states got $10 billion in total. So for $1.5 billion has to be focused on socially and economically disadvantaged businesses, which typically include tribal enterprises. $1 billion for an incentive program if they can show that they have robust support for socially and economically disadvantaged businesses, and $500 million for very small businesses. and that's defined as less than 10 employees. There's also a $500 million pot of money for technical assistance programs. And these funds can be provided directly to states, and again, presumably tribes, can be provided to the Minority Business Development Agency out of Commerce, or Treasury can hold on to these funds. And the intention here is to provide technical assistance to very small or socially economically disadvantaged businesses. And the definition of technical assistance in the statute is in legal, accounting, and financial advisory services. So tribes should be eligible, hopefully, if we see Treasury guidance, for the $1 billion incentive program, as well as $500 million to provide technical assistance to very small or socially economically disadvantaged businesses, which would include tribal member or even tribal owned businesses. So tribal participation, again, defines state to include federally recognized tribes, $500 million. There is a requirement, although it's unclear that it's a mandatory requirement. The typical statutory practice is that states have to file a notice of intent to participate within 30 days of enactment. That same language has been carried over for tribes. So that would be April 10th. The statute was enacted on March 11th. And as well, the Treasury has 60 days to allocate these funds to tribes. And then there is a statutory allocation formula, but it's mostly discretionary. So it says that the tribes funds will be allocated by Treasury as the Treasury Secretary determines as appropriate, and considering employment and economic data, whatever that means. So in the law, there's a definition that with respect to employment data, at least, that if the Secretary determines that employment data with respect to a state, which now includes tribe, is unavailable from the Bureau of Labor Statistics at Department of Labor, the Secretary shall consider other economic and employment data that is otherwise available. So this is a question, maybe for Treasury, what kind of economic and employment data will you be looking for from tribes? What other sources might you be looking for? You have the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Does that have employment data at the tribal government level, at the tribal level? What is the source of that data? So that's maybe a key question. Again, tribes are also eligible for technical assistance in setting up these programs. So built into the original law and unchanged with the amendments is that Treasury will provide technical assistance to states and now presumably tribes to help set up these programs in the first place. And then again, tribes are eligible to get funding to assist their small businesses with accessing this program. So program opportunities for tribes on the credit support side, a few examples. So a tribe might set up a collateral support program, say for tribal member owned businesses. As we know, many of our tribal members, especially those who live on the reservation, don't have access to collateral. We might own our home, but we don't own the land. Or maybe we don't even own the home. Maybe we're in a rental home. So we may not have sufficient collateral necessary to support a finance program for my small business, my tribal member owned small business. So a collateral support program would allow a tribe to provide additional cash collateral to the bank or to the CDFI or to the credit union for a tribal member owned business. Or if the tribe itself has its own small business and it's trying to borrow some additional funds, and the tribal business doesn't have any assets yet or is building its assets and it doesn't have collateral, then a collateral support program using the cash collateral would be one opportunity to support lending the borrower, whether it's again tribal member owned or the tribe. A tribe could participate directly in financing for tribal member owned or tribal owned small businesses. So, you know, your new Section 17 corporation gets its charter, and the tribe has to capitalize the company, and then the company needs to borrow some money, and it doesn't have any assets. So you might do a collateral support, or if the Bank of America or the local Bank of the West says we can only give you a $5 million loan and the company needs 10 million, then the tribe itself could make the loan for 5 million, the companion loan, and directly finance. The tribes can also lend funds to CDFIs, including their native CDFIs, for relending. So I know a lot of CDFIs maybe don't have access to a lot of capital, although I think the feds just put in $6 billion to the CDFI program. But there is another way as well to support both your CDFI and the work it's doing with tribal members and small businesses. And so you could either do that, just give money directly to the native CDFI for them to relend, or you could develop a loan guarantee program with your native CDFI or a local CDFI or your bank or your credit union. And you could work out an arrangement with them and bring them into a loan guarantee program where, again, these funds would be used to guarantee the loans made by the CDFI, the bank, or the credit union. On the other credit support, on the equity investment side, so these would be direct investments. And I see you've got a question real quick. If the vehicle is set up as a Section 17, can the Section 17 pull funds directly, or does it still need to come via the tribe? So, the short answer is these funds will only go to the tribe. So only the tribe is eligible to apply for these monies. The tribe can then directly invest those funds in the Section 17 through the equity investment program. So the tribe can make a direct equity investment, which of course it's making anyway, right? Because it's the tribal owned business. But a tribe can also make a direct equity investment in a tribal member owned business. It might be able to make a direct equity investment in a non-tribal business. A question for Treasury: are we limited to the types of businesses that we can invest in as tribes? So one way to use the funds is to capitalize your tribal owned businesses, again, directly owned or possibly through subsidiaries. Another way is to create maybe a multiple investor venture capital fund, so a fund of funds or the co-investment model that the states have developed, where you go in with maybe other tribes and everybody pools their money in an equity fund. There's some obviously distinct advantages to that. One, you get to diversify your investment, you get to pool funds. So if you don't get that much money and you want to be able to do more investment, you might join up with other tribes who also go in on a fund. And now instead of $5 million, you got a 40, 50, $60 million fund. You, of course, get to diversify your risk, both your investment risk and your administrative risk. Because remember, these programs have to comply with the statute, with the oversight rules, with the compliance rules and risk mitigation rules, with the policy guidance, and the equity investment funds are no different. So one opportunity to invest in kind of a fund of funds or a co-investment fund is that someone else takes care of all of that paperwork. And the tribe doesn't have to worry about, you have oversight, so take that back. You do have to worry about a little bit, but you actually have somebody else managing the administration of that program and ensuring compliance with the federal rules and policy guidance. Speaking of program administration, so there are several options that tribes have for administering, and these are consistent with the same options the states have. So the tribes can directly administer. You can do it individually. So Tribe A sets up a loan guarantee program under the SSBCI, and they administer it directly, whether it's through the finance department or whether it's through an economic development department. Or tribes can go in together through a joint tribal administration. So maybe an intertribal consortium. And so the 19 pueblos of New Mexico, as an example, instead of setting up 19 different programs, they set up one Pueblo program, and everybody puts their money into that, and that administers the program for all of the pueblos, as an example. You can create a separate governmental or nonprofit entity. So some states, for example, have stood up development authorities, and so they're, of course, political subdivisions of the state, or maybe they've set up a nonprofit entity that will administer the program. Others have hired third-party administrators, so completely unrelated to the state. So you can hire somebody who's for-profit or nonprofit. There's no limitation or rule on that. But you'd have a completely third party administer the program for you. Several states have done that. And then finally, if you're going to do the equity investment, if you decide to do the venture capital fund, then again, the tribe can either set up its own venture capital fund, or it can go in a co-investment model or with other tribes and create a separate venture capital fund that invests that money directly. Okay, so let's see. We got a question. Is the tribe expected to have all of these potentially complex ideas fleshed out by April 10th? No. So the good news is the April 10th, and I'll show you the application in a minute. The April 10th date is just a raise your hand, I want money. And then an allocation will happen. The states do have to have the programs fleshed out before they actually get their money, but that doesn't appear to be the case for tribes, because the tribal allocation is a notice of intent, raise your hand, I want money, and then that's within 30 days, and then within 60 days, so only 30 days later, the allocation would occur. There appears to be no requirement in the amendments that tribes actually have to provide program information in order to get their money. So that's a question for Treasury. The states definitely do have to submit program and actually apply and submit the program information before they get their money, but it's unclear that tribes have to do that. But in any event, they don't have to do that by April 10th. They might have to do that in order to actually get the funds. And that's, again, a question for Treasury. And then lastly, all this administration, remember there was a 5% allowance for states to use 5% of the money that they received for administrative costs. It's not clear in the amendments whether that's also true for tribes. So question for Treasury, what's our administrative cost allowance? Is it 5%? There is some language in the policy guidance that these funds are actually treated like grants and other financial assistance under OMB rules. And I know tribes have dealt with this question with respect to the other CARES Act funding, for example, and especially the question of indirect cost allowances. So maybe a question for Treasury, what are our funding options for the administration? Okay, real quick, a question, would this apply to the ANCs? So the Alaska Native corporations would have to meet, they would not be able to get funding directly. The definition of tribe in this amendment is a federally recognized Indian tribe. So the 229 Alaska Native villages that are federally recognized would be eligible for this funding, but not the ANCs directly. And then the villages could set up their own program, and they could do a direct investment or a loan guarantee program. And an ANC would have to qualify as a small business under the small business rules. Okay, next question. Can a tribe provide seed money to its own small business if it wants to develop? Let me see I don't see the rest of that question. I think the answer is yes, through the direct equity investment. You would have to, of course, set up an in-house, directly administer the direct equity investment program, but there doesn't appear to be any prohibition, at least in the statute, of tribes investing directly in their own tribally owned businesses. as long as it meets the definition of small business and you meet the leverage ratio. So I would interpret the 1-to-1 minimum as for every dollar that you use of the federal money, the tribe has to put in another dollar for its own businesses. Of course, if you're doing a joint venture, for example, and the tribe's going to be a 51% owner, and maybe a non-tribal, non-Indian entity is going to be a 49% owner, then the tribe's fund might be the federal money, and the other money comes from the non-tribal entity, and that would meet the 1-to-1. As long as it's 1-to-1, that would meet the leverage ratio. So the tribe doesn't have to match it with its own money. It does have to match it with non-federal money. So it'd be private money or non-federal or tribal money. Can seed money already invested be counted? No. So this is all go forward. It's all go forward. So if you've already put money in, then no, it doesn't count towards the 1-to-1. It's for any new money that you put in, then you're going to have to meet the 1-to-1. And you can only use this program for new money. So you basically can't use it to reimburse yourself for maybe funds you've already put in. So you would want to, if you've got a Section 17 that isn't capitalized or needs additional funding. So remember, it's anywhere on that development stage. So even if it is partially capitalized and you've got to put in more money, it's the more money that has to meet the 1-to-1 requirement. Okay, so technical assistance opportunities. $500 million the Treasury got to provide technical assistance to small businesses. So for those tribes that might have a business incubator program, or might already have some other assistance they're providing to their own tribal members to help stand up small businesses, this would be an opportunity to get additional funding to support those technical assistance efforts for your tribal member small businesses. There's also an opportunity here, if you're in the business of providing advice, to actually contract with the state or with other tribes or directly with Treasury to provide that same technical assistance. So maybe a Section 17 or a tribally chartered entity that's in the small business development arena and is already working with small businesses could go to the tribe and try and get funds to support that technical assistance, or contract with the state of Arizona, for example, who has a requirement to spend some of its money on socially and economically disadvantaged businesses. So there might be an opportunity to partner with the state or with other tribes or directly with Treasury to provide this technical assistance. Okay, let's see. I got another question. The 10-to-1 leverage ratio, is that $1 of SSBCI and 9 from other sources, or is it the other way around? It's $1 of SSBCI, 9 from other sources. So they want you to take that $1 and leverage it up to $10. So so that's the target, and that's what you typically see. Of course, if you did a loan guarantee program and you said we'll guarantee 90% or 50%, then you would show that whatever you put in to cover that guarantee, that whatever you can leverage up. And the loan guarantee programs and the cash collateral programs, in the experience that they've seen, actually provide the most leverage. Almost all of the programs beat the 1-to-1 match, 1-to-1 ratio, and that's the minimum. But that's, you know, even the equity investments are somewhere around 6 or 7 to 1. Question: the 1-to-1 match is a heavy lift for small tribes with limited resources. Any way around that? Probably not. It's a statutory requirement that the minimum is 1-to-1. But remember, it's not just the tribes. The one doesn't have to be tribe and one fed. One can be somebody else. One can be a state investment. One can be a grant from the feds, or a grant from the state, or one could be a joint venture agreement if you brought in a non-tribal entity to joint venture with you. Okay, so some key questions that the amendments that, at least for me, have been raised, and it sounds like, given the questions that we have here, also helpful to have maybe some of these questions answered to help answer some of the questions we've received so far. If a tribe files an individual notice, can it later join with other tribes to do joint programs? So the way, and the reason why I raised this question is the way the statute was currently written, a state can file an individual notice or it can join with other states to file a notice of intent that there's going to be a joint program. But we've only got now 20 days. And so do the tribes who maybe want to join with other tribes have to have that figured out before April 10th? Or can 5 tribes file 5 individual notices and then get together later and say, hey, we want to do joint programs. Can we do that? So that's kind of the first question. Do I have to know ahead of time that I want to join up with other tribes? Or can I join up individually and then join with other tribes later? Another question, what's the economic or employment data that Treasury is going to use for tribes? Is that tribal reported data? Is that Bureau of Labor Statistics data? Is it census data? What data might they be using to consider for part of the allocation? Will tribes have to get approval of their programs from Treasury before they can spend the funds? That's what the states have to do. And since tribes are now defined as states, what's Treasury's view going to be about whether tribes also have to get approval of their programs before they can spend the money? Will tribes be required to enter into allocation agreements? Again, this is just clarifying the role of the tribe as state within the broader scheme of the program. Will there be limitations, geographic or other ownership limitations on the small businesses that you can support? And I raise this because there is one state, Wyoming. Well, there's 3 states that didn't participate the last time around. Wyoming was one, Alaska was another. And so the cities, municipalities are able to join the program if the state does not join. So when Wyoming did it, they had 4 or 5 cities that joined for a program in Wyoming, and they were limited to being able to invest in businesses that were within their municipal limits. So in other words, they couldn't lend money or do a program statewide. They could only do it within their geographic limits. Are tribes going to have the same limitation? Or will they be able to invest off the reservation? So if you have a tribal member that has a business off the reservation, can the tribe assist that tribal member? Or is it only for on-reservation small businesses? Is it limited to just tribal member or tribal-owned businesses? Is there a limitation there? As I said earlier, or can tribes invest in non-tribal businesses through the equity investment program, for example? For equity investments, will tribes have to be the majority owner? So if I do the equity investment program and I decide I want to invest in XYZ business, a startup business, does the tribe have to be a 51% owner? Or can it have a lesser investment or ownership stake? Can tribes invest or provide credit support to their own tribal-owned companies? There seems to be no prohibition. So that's why some of the examples I've been using include being able to do direct investments in your tribal-owned company, your Section 17, your tribally chartered entity. But a question for Treasury, there's nothing in the rules, the policy guidance, or in the allocation agreement, or in the statute that prevents a state from investing in its own state corporations. So presumably tribes will be treated exactly the same and they will be able to invest in their own companies. Are tribes eligible for the $1 billion incentive funding? So if we can show as a tribe a robust support for socially and economically disadvantaged businesses, which probably include most of our tribal member-owned businesses, maybe even some of our own tribal-owned businesses, how do we get a cut of the $1 billion incentive? And then last big question, how do I pay for this? So what are my administrative cost limits? Is it the 5% that the states have, or can I use my IDC, my indirect cost percentage? Let me take a look and see. There's a couple of other questions that we've got. Can a private office or private family office or foundation put up the one-to-one match in exchange for equity? I think the answer to that is yes, if it's a direct investment, because it would show an equity investment. Now you'd have to be careful of what you're trying to invest in on the tribal side, right? So if it's a Section 17, they typically, under their charters, do not allow outside investments from non-tribal entities. Other tribes can join. So you have several Section 17s that are multi-tribal owned Section 17s, but certainly a tribally chartered enterprise, depending on how the tribe has structured it, a state chartered, a stock corporation that a tribe might own, it could be structured that way. So you could have an outside investment. You can have outside foundations participating in that in exchange for equity and putting up part of the 1 or 9, the 9-to-1. Depends on how you want to negotiate that with the tribe. Can the technical assistance apply to Native nonprofits? So the definition of small business is a business concern. I think that's a good question to ask Treasury. What is in the definition of small business or socially and economically disadvantaged business? Does that include nonprofits? So can we support nonprofits? The nonprofits are eligible for the lending programs. I don't think they're eligible for the equity investment programs because nonprofits are not don't have ownership interest in them that way. At least nonprofits as defined in the statute. But a nonprofit could come to a tribe and ask for a loan guarantee on a loan to the nonprofit. And as long as it meets the small business requirement, i.e. less than 500, and the loan is not more than 5 million or 20 million on the other side, then the nonprofits would be eligible. So given that, I would assume, but again, maybe a question for Treasury, is on the technical assistance program, are nonprofits eligible for that technical assistance that the $500 million is intended to fund? Could we use cash received from a PPP loan as a one-to-one investment? I don't know. There's not, that we'll have to see Treasury guidance with respect to how the other programs fit in with this program. So your PPP loan, first of all, is already 100% guaranteed by the feds. It's not a grant, it's a loan, it's a forgivable loan. So there is a question I think the Treasury will have to answer about how do other federal monies play inside of this match, and especially since everybody, states and local governments and tribes are getting hundreds of billions of dollars. Of course, tribes are getting about 30 billion, but the states are getting another few $100 billion, some of which could go towards these efforts. So I think we'll have to see what Treasury's guidance says about how other programs in the COVID relief suite of programs can be used or leveraged. I may have missed the answer. Will tribes have to provide the employment or economic data in the notice of intent, or will that be submitted later? That's a good question. I don't know. Let me show you what the notice of intent looked like the last time around. So this is what the states had to submit the last time around. It's literally a page. On behalf of the state of X, I notify the department, we intend to apply. And there's two boxes, the capital access program and the other credit support program. So if a tribe is going to do a loan guarantee, wants to do a loan guarantee, wants to do a venture capital, you would check the other credit support program. Capital access program sits out there by itself. Everything else is under other credit support. Who's the official? Who's the contact person? And a signature. This is all they had to do last time. So I don't know if Treasury will expand this for whether there will be additional information to provide by the tribes or by the states. The states allocation is a little easier for Treasury because it's a year-over-year change of employment data. And so Bureau of Labor Statistics, which keeps this up religiously at the state level, at the tribal level, we'll see. So hopefully that answers that. We will see what's in the notice of intent, and we will see what Treasury guidance is with respect to information that they will ask for from the tribes. Equity assumes state LLC, LP, etc. Not necessarily. Tribally chartered enterprises could allow for equity investments in a tribally chartered enterprise under tribal corporate law, for example. So you could have a state chartered LLC with membership interest. Of course, you could have a state chartered stock corporation with shareholder stock issuance. But many tribes have their own tribal corporate codes. And so you can create a stock corporation and a tribal corporate code, or you can create a LLC under a tribal LLC that would allow outside investment, or you can negotiate an investment structure, outside investment structure with a tribe, and the tribal council can directly charter the corporation with a non-tribal ownership interest in it. Will we be sending out the deck? Yes, the deck's available. It's in the handout, and it's also available. We're happy to email it out. And of course, the webinar will be recorded. When is Treasury consultation on this program? Who knows? They haven't announced it. So if you're interested, it would be great if multiple tribes sent a notice to Secretary Yellen to say, hey, are we having consultation on this? We've only got 20 days to get our notice of intent in. And actually, yeah, 20 days, no, 30 days, 10 days now. And it'd be nice to know how you're going to allocate this money. And again, I've posed some questions, and we've got some other questions raised. Those will all would be good to get confirmation from Treasury. Can VC equity funds be used by a tribe to acquire qualifying small business? I think so. And here's why, because, the equity investment would be made into an entity, and that entity, of course, can then use that money for whatever it wants to use it for as part of its business. So if the small business that gets the direct equity investment then turns around and uses that equity investment to buy another company, then I think that's allowable. There's nothing apparently in the rules. Again, I've reviewed the policy guidance. There's no requirement, and several states that have done the equity investment have focused on later stage development, and whether it's late development, mezzanine stage where the business is basically plateaued. So several states have focused their VC money on that late stage because it's lower risk, right? The business is already operating. It just needs a little bit more money to expand, as opposed to, say, the seed stage or the pre-seed stage where it's higher risk. There's no real business there yet. So I think that you can probably use that money at a later stage, in a later stage company, or maybe even early stage, but the company's up and running. You make the equity investment, they turn around, use that investment to go buy another company. That's part of the expansion that appears to be allowed under the program, and at least is what several states have done. Okay, I apologize if you've already addressed this, but can you select capital access and other? Yes, you can check both boxes. So it's not one or the other, you can check both. My only point was the capital access program, which is the kind of the loan portfolio reserve, loan reserve program. So the insurance policy for a loan, that's explicitly defined in the statute. And that's why it's a separate box here. But all the other credit support programs, which is a separate provision in the statute, covers loan guarantee, covers collateral support, covers relending, covers loan participation, direct loan, and covers the venture capital equity investment. So if you want to do any of those, you have to check the other credit support program. If you want to do the loan insurance, you would check capital access, but you can, in fact, check both. Okay, we've got about 10 more minutes. So let me do a last call. I think this is, that was my last slide. So I'm happy to answer any other questions the best I can. And so while I'm waiting to see if there are any other questions that come in, did I get to every question? Let me ask my co-moderator on there if I got everything. So this program is basically going to end up like the first round of TED bond allocations. I don't know. I mean, the TED bond allocations was, there was an allocation cap per tribe, right? $100 million, I think was the first round cap. It was kind of a first come, first serve on the TED bond allocation, if I recall. There was no real requirement to produce any information other than we want an allocation. You maybe had to provide information about how you were going to use that TED bond. And so here you don't have to, this is going to the tribe itself to provide support to small businesses. So the key here is if tribes have to go to Treasury to get approval for their program, then they're standing up a loan guarantee program or an equity investment program. They're going to get whatever they're going to get. Treasury will decide the allocation. They have to consider employment and economic data. You're not asking for money. There's no, the notice of intent didn't say, give me $5 million or give me $50 million. It just says, I want money, and then Treasury will decide how much money you get. They might change that, and they might offer an opportunity for tribes to ask for a certain amount of money until Treasury begins consultation. Who knows how that allocation is going to look? But I wouldn't equate this to the TED bond allocation at all. This is not a debt instrument that tribes are getting. This is a grant to tribes to turn around and relend or invest directly in small businesses. SSBCI. Let me pull my. Will SSBCI consultation occur with Treasury similar to what will be expected for larger art programs? Well, I hope so. There's nothing in the statute that requires that Treasury consult on this. So we're relying on the executive order and the president's commitment to tribal consultation. So let's hope that Treasury does in fact engage in consultation with the tribes on this. What is the best approach for a Native nonprofit to provide technical assistance to tribal enterprises or small businesses? Partner with the tribe, get a grant. Well, only the tribes are eligible for the TA money. So a tribe would have to go to Treasury and get the access to the $500 million and then bring that, whatever funds they get, into the tribe. And then a nonprofit could then partner or contract with the tribe to actually provide that technical assistance. Of course, the nonprofit could partner and contract directly with Treasury and get the funds that Treasury maybe holds back for itself, or it can partner with a state as well. Do you think a tribally owned small business will only be able to do business with its tribe, or can it shop the best funding match? That's a good question. That gets to my question about whether the tribes themselves will be limited in who they can support and who they can invest in. So if Treasury says, so the states, again, the municipalities, maybe they're the better example here. The municipalities that had a program could only invest in businesses located within the municipality. So if Treasury creates a similar limitation and says to the tribes, you can only invest in your own tribal member owned businesses. So Pasquayaki tribe can only invest in Pasquayaki tribal members. Gila River tribe can only invest in Gila River tribal members. Then that would be a limitation. If the Treasury says you can invest in anybody, then a tribal member owned business could shop around and could look for another tribe. You know, maybe their tribe doesn't do a program. And so, a tribal member owned business for, I'll pick on another tribe. Who should I pick on? I'll pick on Salt River since I'm in Arizona. So Salt River says we're not doing the program. So you have tribal member owned business who wants help. Maybe they can go down the street to Gila River, and Gila River, who has a program, can help them out. Those are questions I think for us to ask of Treasury to clarify. Will a recording be made? Yes, we will have a recording. It'll be up on our website, and we will send an email out to everybody with the link to everybody who RSVP'd. And for those of you who RSVP'd and didn't get on, we will also make sure you get a link. Do I see any significant delay from SSBCI resulting? Well, there's no statutory requirement to allocate within 60 days. It says that that the secretary may allocate within 60 days. Of course, the secretary may allocate the $20 billion within 60 days too. So I'm pretty confident Treasury is starting to have their head explode right now. Good news is SSBCI is in a different area of Treasury, and they've got to stand this back up for the states. This program actually expired in 2015. So they have to stand this back up for the states. So I would hope that we don't have a delay, because I don't think the same people are working on this, but don't quote me on that. But it is in two different parts of Treasury. So let's hope that the SSBCI Treasury folks are getting going and will have guidance and or consultation for us soon, and that they won't use some of the other consultation that they're doing as a reason for why they can't do consultation on this. All right, let me see. Any final, to clarify some math with an example, if a tribe receives a $20 million allocation, could the tribe make $4 or $5 million equity investments? Yes. They could make $21 million equity investments. They could take the $20 million and they could put $10 million into a loan guarantee program and $5 million into, or $10 million into an equity investment program. So, this will again be part of the question of whether Treasury will have to approve our programs, like they have to approve what the states want to do. In which case we'll have to have some design ready. And if not, if we don't have to get our programs approved, if all we have to do is certify we're going to comply with the policy guidance, we sign the allocation agreement and comply with the national standards, then we would devise equity investments however we see fit. There appears to be no limitation from a statutory perspective. Your 20 million would have to be matched with another 20 million at a minimum, and hopefully up to 200 million, 10 to 1. So that would be the only major real concern with respect to how you divvy up your investments, as I have to be able to meet my 1-to-1 leverage ratio requirements. Okay, we had about a minute left. I just wanted to make another couple of things. So any questions? Here's my cell, here's my email. Again, the recording will be available. The presentation itself is in the handouts. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to email me and I will respond to you as quickly as I can. I will likely be sending, on behalf of a couple of clients, a letter to Treasury saying, where's your consultation on this? We need to get going, chop, chop. So I encourage all the other tribes on this call and tribal enterprises to do the same in order to get some traction with Treasury on being able to get not only these monies out, but getting us answers to the questions that you've asked me, which hopefully I've answered relatively accurately, given the lack of information, and that we should be asking the Treasury. And then on a final note, we will be doing a follow-up webinar to this webinar on program administration, where we will be going in more detail on the policy guidance, the allocation agreement, and the national standards. So presuming that tribes will have to comply with the other parts of the statute that apply to states and the requirement to certify and comply with policy guidance, again, allocation agreement, and the national standards, we'll be doing a follow-up webinar in about 2 to 3 weeks. We don't have a date set. So if you're interested in that, we'll send out an email to everyone who registered for this webinar and let you know when we have that follow-up webinar. And we'll be going through all the information tribes should have as they're contemplating. Now, I would recommend raise your hand, try and get some money. If you decide not to do it, you can always say, don't send me my money, and you can put it back in the pot. But if you don't raise your hand, you're probably not going to get any money. This is not an automatic allocation. So you've got to raise your hand to say you want your money. So I encourage every tribe that wants money to raise their hand at a minimum, and then we'll work on designing programs later. Okay, so with that, thank you very much, everybody, for participating. We appreciate the questions. We appreciate the request for information. And with that, we will complete and have a very good week, and happy Easter.